Dracula stole everything from a woman that you've never heard of. In 1872, a woman named Carmilla was hunting through the Austrian countryside, seducing her victims, sleeping in a coffin, and terrifying an entire village. And nobody remembers her name. 25 years later, a man named Bram Stoker wrote a book called Dracula, set it in Styria, same as Carmilla, mind you, but then his research notes show him crossing out Styria and replacing it with Transylvania. Dracula became the vampire. Carmilla became a footnote. And I think we both know exactly why a story about a powerful, unapologetic woman who wanted other women got quietly shelved in favor of a tall man in a cape. Hi friends, I'm Betty Rage, and this is Lashes and Lore, where I crochet a granny square each week from an old sweater, and I ruin your childhood one folklore deep dive at a time. And today we are talking about none other than Carmilla. So, let me tell you what is actually happening in this book, because I promise it is not what you think. In 1872, a man named Joseph Sheridan Le Fanu published a novella called Carmilla. Laura is living alone in a castle in the Austrian countryside with her father, essentially no friends, no social life, just vibes, in isolation. And then one night, a carriage crashes outside, and out comes this girl. Beautiful, mysterious, gives absolutely nothing away about who she is or where she's from. Her name is apparently Carmilla, and Laura is immediately obsessed with her. Like uncomfortably obsessed. She's having these dreams, these fevers, this feeling that she can't really name. And Carmilla keeps showing up in her room at night, whispering things, and Laura just keeps on letting her in for some reason. Now, I want to be clear. Le Fanu is not soft about what Carmilla actually is. This woman sleeps in a coffin submerged in 7 inches of blood. She sleeps with her eyes open. She is a monster by every technical definition. And Le Fanu earns the horror before he earns the sympathy. Meanwhile, girls in the village are getting sick and dying, and locals are losing their minds, and every man in a 50-mile radius is completely useless. And the part that nobody is talking about, Carmilla is never coded as evil to the women around her. Laura doesn't want her gone, she wants her closer. It's only the men and the fathers, the doctors, the generals who look at Carmilla and see something that needs to be destroyed. And they do destroy her. Horribly. Eventually. But the whole time that you are reading it, you're not entirely sure that you're on their side. Oh, and one more thing before we move on to the next section here. Carmilla isn't even her real name. Throughout the book, she goes by names like Mylarka, Mircalla, Carmilla, all of which are anagrams of each other. Her entire identity is this puzzle that she's been rearranging for centuries just to survive. So keep that in mind, because we will be coming back to it. But it also raises a question. How did this book get published in 1872 at all? Because what I just described to you should not have been publishable at that time for a myriad of prejudice reasons. So here is what Le Fanu did. And honestly, it's one of the most clever things ever, in my opinion. This is 1872 Victorian England. Women's sexuality is not really a conversation that's happening in polite society, and lesbianism, specifically, is so far outside acceptable discourse that it barely has a name yet. Publishing a story about a woman who hunts, seduces, and falls in love with other women should have been career-ending for Le Fanu. And yet, Carmilla got published, serialized in a magazine, read in drawing rooms, because Carmilla isn't a woman, technically. She's a vampire, a creature outside of human categories, outside human gender, outside human morality. The desire between her and Laura gets to exist on the page because the censors didn't have a box to put it in. He hid it in plain sight, though, really. And everyone who needed to not see it didn't see it. But those who did definitely did. Fanu wrote that in 1872, and now I need to tell you what Bram Stoker did with it 25 years later. And that's where this story gets a little bit on the infuriating side, to be honest, because Stoker's research notes are archived. They're available, and they show that when he started to work on Dracula in 1890, he set it in Styria, the same region as Carmilla, same Austrian countryside. His notes show him replacing it with Transylvania. We don't know exactly when that happened, while he was actively writing. And it wasn't just the setting that he took. The vampire expert who shows up to explain what's happening and lead the charge against the vampire. Well, that character came from Carmilla. Van Helsing is not original. That entire template existed in Fanu's novella first. Stoker took the setting, took the character blueprint, took the Gothic atmosphere, took the entire infrastructure of Fanu's story, and made it foreign, made it safe for Victorian readers to consume, and then he made the vampire a man. Dracula succeeded where Carmilla was buried. Dracula became the blueprint for every vampire story that followed, and Dracula is in every classroom, every bookstore, every Halloween costume, and Carmilla got a footnote. And I think that's exactly what they wanted to happen, because Dracula is a story about invasion, about a foreign threat, about masculine power. It's a story that makes sense to Victorian anxieties. Carmilla is a story about desire, about women wanting each other, about power that doesn't come from conquest, but from attraction. It's a story that made people uncomfortable in ways that they couldn't quite name. One of those stories gets remembered and revered. Heck, I love it. You've probably seen my Dracula video. But the other one gets forgotten. But what they didn't count on is you can bury a story, but you cannot kill it, because Carmilla just kept coming back. In 1970, Hammer Horror made a film called The Vampire Lovers, starring Ingrid Pitt as Carmilla. It's a direct adaptation of Fanu's novel, and it's genuinely erotic in a way that most vampire films weren't at the time. Pitt plays Carmilla as seductive, intelligent, dangerous, and completely unrepentant about what she wants. And then, in 1976, Anne Rice published Interview with the Vampire. Rice explicitly cited Carmilla as her inspiration, and you can literally see it everywhere in the Vampire Chronicles. And for everyone who was asking why I didn't mention Anne Rice, the Vampire Chronicles, in my Dracula video, it's because that wasn't her inspiration. And it's very clear. The sensuality, the moral ambiguity, the idea that vampires could be tragic instead of monstrous. Anne Rice basically took Carmilla's blueprint and built an entire empire on it. And we love her for it. And then in 2014, a Canadian web series called Carmilla premiered on YouTube. And it ran for 3 seasons, 121 episodes total. They updated the entire story to a university setting. There are over 10 million views here with this web series. A movie, merchandise, a fan base that is still very active. Every generation rediscovers her. Every generation retells her story, because there is something in it that just refuses to stay buried. And if you play tabletop RPGs, then I need to show you exactly where she's ended up, because this is where it gets really interesting. Where are all my Vampire the Masquerade people? This one's for you. So if you've only ever played D&D, then you might not know Vampire the Masquerade. It's another tabletop RPG just like D&D, but instead of playing fantasy heroes off to save the day, you are playing vampires living in the modern world. trying to hide what you are from humans and from each other. And this is not Twilight. The entire game is built around one mechanic: secrecy. And every choice you make, every action you take, has to account for the fact that if humans discover that you are a vampire, you die. Everyone dies. The whole organization dies. But here is what's deeper. The game also tracks your humanity as you do all of these monstrous things, as you feed, as you lie, as you hide. You lose your connection to your mortal self. And the more inhuman you become, the less control that you have over the beast, the predator that lives inside every vampire. So the game is asking you a question every single night. How much of yourself are you willing to sacrifice just to survive? How much of your humanity can you trade for your safety? And that is Carmilla. That's the entire novella. She spent her entire existence hiding, using false names, pretending to be human, trading pieces of herself for survival. She is the masquerade made flesh. Remember those anagrams? Carmilla, Mylarka, Mercala. She didn't just run a personal masquerade. She built her entire identity around the ability to rearrange herself to become whoever she needed to be in order to survive in a world that would destroy her if they knew the truth. Vampire the Masquerade didn't invent that mechanic. Carmilla did in 1872. Carmilla didn't just inspire vampire fiction. She built the mechanics that modern-day vampire games are still playing on. Not just games. Castlevania, hello, Warhammer, you know who you are. And speaking of things that hide in plain sight and refuse to die, let's talk for just a second. Here's what I need you to hear. The Fanu hid queerness in plain sight and called it survival. And for over 150 years, we've called that erasure. But if you know what hiding looks like, if you know what it feels like to exist in spaces that would destroy you, if they knew what you actually were, if you know what it's like to use different versions of yourself to move through a world that wasn't built for you, I want you to know that that is not weakness or something to be ashamed of, but rather it's strategy. I'm about to say a word that everyone gets triggered about, but the patriarch spent centuries telling us that feminine power, queer desire, queer identity, and women who want autonomy, all of that is the monster. It's monstrous, dangerous, something that needs to be staked through the heart. So we learn to hide it. We learn to call it something else. We learn to exist in the margins. Carmilla is still there. Anne Rice built an empire on her. Over 10 million people watched a web series. Every generation rediscovers her because there is something true in that story that refuses to die. And if you identify with any of this, if any of this lands for you, you're not the monster that they told you that you were. You are Carmilla, and you are still here. If you haven't quite had your fill of vampires, then you should definitely check out this video I did over here on Dracula. And don't forget to use the comment word Carmilla down below to let me know what you thought of this one. Also, happy Pride Month to all my lovelies out there. Happy Pride. This is our Granny Square. It is done. Another one for the Frankenblanket, the Blankenstein, whatever you want to call it. And if you want to see more of what I do with recycled, unraveled sweaters, thrifted yarn, the link is down below, and you should sign up for my newsletter because I'm dropping new merch on my site later this month. I'm Betty Rage, your favorite nerdy goth mom, and this was Lashes and Lore. Be good to each other, love each other, make good choices, and as always, free mom hugs from me to you. Bye, I'll see you in the next one.